welcome to Let's Talk About It, where we come together and talk about hot topics that could impact the mental health of our students and families in Memphis-Shelby County schools. Today, I'm joined by a group of panelists that will be able to talk with us about domestic teen violence. People?
Oh, I'll go first. My name is Tiffany Williams. I am a special project coordinator with the Office of Coordinated School Health. Excited to be here.
My name is Julian Cross, and I am the internal communication specialist for Memphis-Shelby County Schools.
My name is Judah Abraham. I'm a student at East High School.
And I'm, again, Dr. Ashley Johnson. I'm a school social worker with Memphis-Shelby County Schools. And so we're going to have like an open dialogue conversation about teen dating violence and kind of just give different perspectives and how it's impacting our students in the district or even families, and some things that the parents can recognize when they see their kids that may be struggling in these types of relationships and really just understand how to communicate. So my first question would be, so in today's digital age, how do you identify, like how do you define teen dating? And how has it evolved over the years from time where some of us seasoned folks have dated?
Me and Judah, we're probably closer in age than I am to you all. I'm a part of Gen Z, and so dating for us looks totally different than it is for millennials or the generations beforehand. So we have to do a lot with digital dating. So that's where the DMs come in, and beyond that, we're less in person. We're just, we're so entrenched in social media that has become our door for contacting one another and opening up and starting relationships and all of that.
I would like to agree, but I feel like people use social media so much to date nowadays that they forget to have like in-person conversations like people normally are supposed to date. And I feel like that is a reason that a lot of relationships now don't really make it as much as they used to.
Okay.
Yeah. Because we were talking like right before the podcast began about like how, of course, in our generation we didn't even have cell phones. So like for us, I told her it was like 6 of us in a household, so we didn't even know if we would be able to call our person back. But instead, it did force us to have conversations on the phone. It forced us to have to get to know a person beyond just holding the phone or text messaging. I go out and I hear a lot of students just say, I don't even like to talk on the phone. I'd rather text, or we fall asleep with FaceTime on, so a lot of times they don't have that. But I also think in the digital age too, because now it's recognized as one of the ways abuse can happen in a relationship, because now it allows more control on the other end, if that makes sense. So like, say for instance, a person may be more prone to say, well, share your location with me, or what's your password to your phone, or let me go through your phones just so you can prove that you trust me, or why this person like your picture, or why they loved it, why they hearted instead of liked it, that must mean something, so I think that kind of put that pressure on youth who are dating as well, because now it's easier to be controlled versus we didn't have cell phones, so if we did get a phone call, we didn't know about it until we came back from whatever we were doing,
Or
so I think that's a part
that
of it
friendship again,
Right.
with that concept of being able to talk face to face and have and get to know someone personally instead of just digitally, right? And so that kind of leads me to the question of like, how does societal norms and media influence teenage relationships, do you think? Do you want to talk about that a little bit? Like, how do you?
I feel like societal norms, especially, it can come from trust. A lot of people are less trustworthy in this generation because I feel like it's easier, one, to find out if somebody's very unloyal, and with it being so like put out in the media, it makes people very untrustworthy. Sometimes people don't have a reason to be untrustworthy, but it's just what they see out in the media.
Right. And I think we talked prior to about like societal norms and expectations, and so I think there was the social media post about a girl going to a basketball game and where her seats were compared to where her date took her, and the seats were up high, so she left him at the basketball game because it wasn't to her standard. So does that impact dating in itself, seeing it on social media and how people respond to their dissatisfaction instead of having that communication with that person? Instead they go straight to social media. So how does that impact teenage dating?
I absolutely think that social media in particular has a huge impact on the dating scene, because we see those types of videos, and we're going back and forth on social media, like debating about this, whether we feel like she was right or wrong.
Right.
And so we have these our own thoughts that we formulate, and most of the time now we're starting to see people bend towards what I would perceive as the wrong choices. Thinking about the materialistic things rather than the experience of just being with the other person.
Right.
But we're so caught up on, just
Impressing.
the
ideas.
Yeah.
Just the idea, because now you have it where it's like it's not cool to go to certain restaurants. It was a whole big debate about like what restaurants you can't take a person to, and then we just live in an era where they are being influenced by media personalities or by certain rap songs, rap tunes, songs, and the way people portray themselves. Like it's cool to be a city girl. It's cool to be a city boy. Now when they have people in the media who's like, oh, the city girls are up now if they see a Lori Harvey bag a certain guy. I'm just for an example, but just or if they see Future, there's somebody they always bring up, the city boys are up. So it's like they got this back and forth between like who's outdoing who, and it's like that mutual respect is not being formed and talked about more so than it is who can outdo the other person in being a certain way.
And so to your point, to transition to the next question of with who's outdoing one or the other, so going to the concept of teen dating violence, like what are some of the warning signs of an abusive relationship, and how can teenagers really identify that, and how can adults recognize that? Because sometimes adults may think it's cute. Oh, y'all going back and forth, what up? You know what I'm saying? But that's not the case. It can actually be detrimental to the mental health of both parties in that relationship.
Absolutely. And I do want to say, because we, the Department of Coordinated School Health, we did just do a 10-school tour, partnering with safety and security and having these conversations. One of the things that doesn't change is what constitutes any domestic violence relationship is two things. One, power, the other one is control. So if you Google this, you go to any national domestic violence website, hotline, whatever, they're going to tell you those are the two things. It doesn't change. So whether it's trying to have power on you to tell you where you can't go, who you can't hang with, why are you around this group of people, why are you wearing this, whatever that is, you left me on red for 22 minutes and now it's a problem. So this power thing, and then the control, like what is your password, or you need to be sharing your location with me. So those things does not change. So those are the major warning signs, just to see how much a person wants to do that over you. But y'all may have another perspective. I know.
I feel like when people get into a relationship nowadays, it's more of you're mine, you're only mine. Yes, we're dating, you're supposed to be my favorite person. It's like an obligation to be with me because you're my boyfriend or girlfriend or etc. There's times where people, like, you don't want your significant other to hang out with their friends. You want them to just be on the phone with you. You want, stuff like that.
And you hear it a lot.
Right.
Because you have to understand the two major components of a healthy relationship. Yeah. So that's the thing, understanding what's a healthy relationship, so you can understand what's not healthy. And with that, communication and boundaries. And a lot of people don't know how to set those, so that's where the possession era come in, because you need to express how you feel when it comes to finances, when it comes to sex, when it comes to digital things, when it comes to physical touch or whatever it is. Those conversations need to be had, because I've heard too many students say, well, they supposed to engage in intimate activities with me if they're mine. Are they supposed to? Why won't they share their password if they're mine? So if you're not doing it, you must be doing something, or you must be doing something with somebody else. So that's a really good point that you brought up, for sure.
I think that we get into these situations and we don't set those boundaries. We don't set those boundaries. That's what leads to the distrust. One, we're always worried about our significant other or the person that we're dating, doing something that we don't condone. But if we didn't set those boundaries, then that just constitutes that unhealthiness in the relationship.
Yeah.
But it also makes me think, like, just being in the high schools, do they even understand what boundaries are?
No.
And how to identify those? So then
A lot of them don't.
putting that together in a relationship, where do they even know how to define what dating is, what a relationship is, and how the boundary comes into that? Because as soon as we start texting, oh, we go together. We go together real bad. And that what the saying is, we go together real bad.
But you know, Dr.
And so-
Johnson, that is not only just in high school. That's in college. That's
right.
my generation.
It is, but if some things aren't taught early on, then that continues on, and then again it goes back to social media being an influence in that, and who's really being that impact, and with students and parents as well. So I think we kind of have to look at how do we talk about that with boundaries and appropriate dating, health, and relationships, and so forth. And so going into that, so what barriers, and this is specifically to you, Judah, what barriers do you think teenagers face in seeking help or identifying abuse in relationships?
I feel like there is no real output for like advice to give teens when dating. We don't really have, our parents sometimes don't give us the right advice, or our friends influence our relationships. So there's no outlet to get that type of advice when dating. I do get every relationship is different, but I feel like, there's no common output for relationships. But I feel like it still goes back to trust. I feel like there's little trust in today's relationships, and so when you don't really trust somebody, you get very overprotective, and you try and hold that person close, like a little too close. Back to what I was saying about possession.
Right.
So
do you think there's a lack of trust in talking with your parents from teenagers as far as dating and what's appropriate, and to get that advice? You think there's a distrust in that too? Because sometimes we can hear teens say, oh, I don't talk to my parents about anything. You know what I'm saying? So it's just, do you think that kind of contributes to the breakdown as far as understanding teen dating violence, parents being fully aware of what's happening in their child's relationship, or if they even know they're in a relationship?
Yeah, I think there is definitely a loss of trust for parents too. I feel like most teenagers think that their parents are not going to completely understand what dating is like today, even though it is very similar. There's few changes. One of those being social media. Social media was not out back then like it is now. But yeah, I think there is definitely a trust between a child and their parents. Students or people in general just don't really want to tell their parents about their relationship, even though their parents have been through very similar things. It could give good advice, but people just don't want to go to their parents about it.
Okay.
And then I say too, from conversations we've had, is just the fact of teenagers also take their relationships very seriously. And sometimes parents do not understand that, or they don't want to accept that. Like, we may be like, oh, that's just puppy love, y'all will be all right, but then not understanding how this is impacting this child mentally. Like, if they are having a bad day in their relationship, they may not perform well in school because they're constantly thinking about the relationship, or texting back and forth trying to get an understanding of what's going on with their partner. And so if you go and sit and try to talk to your parent about that, is there this fear that they may be dismissive, or they may not just understand because they don't feel like your feelings should be there deeply involved, so some students say that they deal with that, and that's why they choose not to talk to people about their relationship woes and things like that. So even if it's something going on, they're not likely to share.
True. But
And
that also brings a concern, because sometimes it's not always physical abuse when we talk about domestic violence and with relationships. And so having that component of talking to someone and really being able to express feelings, that can also lead to emotional abuse within a relationship, right? So I have concerns as far as, because we know that teens at certain age are not emotionally intelligent per se. I'm not saying that they're not intelligent, but just having that emotional intelligence of how to recognize their emotions and feelings, but how that can also be displaced towards that person that they're in a relationship with, and that can counter, and make emotional abuse in relationships. So how can the school or mental health professionals assist teens in schools to support them when they may be, or not really recognizing there's emotional abuse, but there is emotional abuse? Didn't mean to put you on the spot.
I think it's definitely going to be hard for schools to help with teenage relationships, because most teens don't view like the administration as like a reliable source. You don't want to go up to your principal or your counselor or your vice principal or just somebody in the office and tell them about relationships and stuff, because a lot of times relationships nowadays are very messy and stuff like that. What you were saying earlier, I feel like people have removed the self-love when it comes down to relationships. They don't fully like love and understand themselves, so they rely on somebody else, which is why I feel like relationships can become very abusive, because you're relying too much on somebody else to find your love, and you haven't found it within yourself.
So true.
I
feel like administration and just people at school need to understand that first about teen relationships.
Okay. And you say you're with school
Coordinated
school
School
health. So what additional resources can you provide the schools or the students when it comes to?
So when you were just talking about that, we actually partner with the Family Safety Center to have these conversations, because they work in the field every day. They can provide resources. They have hotlines that you can call and things like that. So we definitely wanted to make sure that we were a resource to them, and we work very closely with the special project coordinators that work with safety and security, because a lot of those students who see them, they see them on a personal level, so we can open that door. Because sometimes, you know how it is, like even as parents, your child may listen to somebody else before they listen to you, just because, even if it's their counterparts or their, a counselor at school or somebody else. So you just always want to make sure that somebody else is there to say, this is a safe space. If you're not comfortable, and even in the sessions that we do with them, you can come and talk to us after. You have your special project coordinator here, as well as the Family Safety Center, an outside resource that you're connected to if you need to definitely have these conversations. So absolutely, yeah.
And I guess, what are some things, and you probably hit on some of them, but kind of just to reiterate for our audience as well. So what are some warning signs or some things that as adults we don't see or should see when it comes to teens dating, whether it's a healthy or not healthy relationship, and just thinking of things that maybe you've talked about with your friends or you've seen, what are some things that us as adults may overlook and not really recognize that a teen may be struggling?
I don't necessarily know, because it's hard for people, and especially kids, are more likely to hide it from their parents. So the parents have to give a space for the kid to be able to talk. A lot of people don't want to go to their parents because they feel like it's going to have some type of they're going to get, like, they might get in trouble with their parents, or their parents might scold them, so you don't want to go to your parents about it. So I feel like first thing, you have to give your child a space to be able to communicate. But once you do that, then the child's more likely to open up and whatnot.
And so I think about maybe some of your friends or peers, and you've seen healthy or maybe unhealthy relationships. What are some things that kind of like give you concern, or have you seen, just being in high school, as far as where you may know that may be healthy or not healthy?
I've seen toxic relationships within my friends. I've tried to help with the best of my abilities, but some things I've seen, like I was saying earlier, possession. I've seen possession at a very high degree when it comes down to other people's relationships, where the person couldn't even hang out with their friends. They couldn't really call. They couldn't do much of anything because they were constantly with the person they were dating. And I saw also how it affected them. They become a little more detached from our friend circle, our friend group. Ultimately, when they end up breaking up, it was very hard for that person to come back. I saw them struggling because once they got removed from that friend group, all they knew was the person that they were dating. But that's it. So when they came back, it was a little hard for them to come back, but it worked out in the end. But yeah.
So it sounds like you're saying, like, as a parent, like for myself with my daughter, or just period, as a parent, to kind of look for those things. So if you probably notice them not talking to their friends as much, ask the question, hey, I hadn't seen your friends around, like, what's going on with that? Or I noticed you've been in your room more lately. Even looking for physical signs, if there's a new mark or something on them, and say, hey, that wasn't there before. Or just pay attention to those things that changes when they're in a relationship, because sometimes you can't hide it. You may get in a car and just be in a different mood, for students. And you have to have those conversations. What's wrong? How did your day go today? If you know they're dating, ask, is everything okay between you and your partner or whoever they may be? So you're opening up that door to let them know you're concerned. Like you can't be dismissive. Like you just can't be to their feelings, their emotions. And I know, like, sometimes we like to say, well, look, I got bills. Try paying some of these bills and let's see how emotional you be. Or try doing this, and then you make it as if they have no choice but to retreat into their rooms and shut down. And you don't want that, especially if they're going through something like that. And you definitely know the signs that they're not the same,
Right.
Yeah, so now I'm playing devil's advocate. So
Okay.
for that student who doesn't have that support system, how do they navigate like that type of space? I know, we talked about, school and having people who are trained to work in that area, but how do they address that? How do they initiate it if they're...
You mean the child itself? Like, if they're not comfortable speaking with someone, the unfortunate part is it sounds like that child was suffering in silence. And that's what we don't want to see.
Right.
They may confide in a friend, but then we also have to make sure that we're educating students as a whole, that if you see this, say something. And then we have to still, in some aspect, keep it confidential, but not necessarily keep it confidential because we know that somebody may be in harm's way to themselves or to others. And so we have to really still educate everyone around. Even if you have a concern as a teacher, this child or the student seems more withdrawn, go to them and talk to them, then encourage them to go to the school counselor. And if they have a teacher that they're close to in the school, to talk to them as well. And then reach out to the parent and try to build that relationship with the parent to say, hey, I've seen such and such kind of, be a little withdrawn. That's going to be your first sign right there, is your teacher reaching out, because your behavior is going to change in the classroom. And sometimes even the quiet kids get overlooked, but sometimes we have to be more vigilant and observant of knowing that even though a child may not talk as much, you still check in on them. And so as adults, we still have to be mindful just of the little things, right? And that can also be impacted with teen dating and how they may find comfort in someone else, and somebody may take advantage of that sensibility, of that vulnerability, and have to be mindful and give that person skills to know how to walk away and recognize that they're also abusing me emotionally because they're taking advantage of my vulnerability. Yeah.
And I like to add to that, because we always encourage the students to create a web of 5, or think of 5 individuals like who you may trust, whether it's a friend, whether it's an aunt, whether it's a church member or a community center or aftercare program that you may go to, and parents being okay with them having that web of 5, and understand that they got to have somebody that they need to talk to, regardless of who it is, because you have to let it out, you have to share, in order to get that support. And like you said, just being mindful and discerning, like you said, even if it's a quiet student, but something is a little different. Like, we have to have people that pay attention to that and not be afraid to send them to those resources within the school and outside of the school if need be.
And I think even to your point of having that web of 5, that parents being open to that web of 5, because it may not include them. And saying, well, my child's supposed to talk to me to talk. Right, but your child may not feel comfortable talking to you at this time. We can be that bridge, to that connector for them to have that safe space and kind of coach you into creating that safe space. So sometimes it's good to have that web of 5, but the parent also understand that you may not be a part of that initially. And kind of work that together.
Absolutely.
Okay. So I think we're kind of moving along in the conversation and kind of coming to a close. I do like the web of 5 as a key point, but what is something else that you think would be beneficial for our listeners to know about teen dating and violence?
Earlier I brought up the point, just a few days ago I was watching a movie called Kimba, and it addressed basically about the life of this young girl. She's entering into adulthood, going to college, falls in love with this young man, and she ends up getting into this relationship. They're in love, and all the signs of domestic abuse are there. And she fell so deep into the trap that it sent her life to like a downward spiral. And so it made me think about coming into this conversation about domestic violence and teen dating, just making sure that students know the signs, making sure that they are aware that this is what this can look like. And the movie Kimber was based upon the 90s, so it 90s and 80s, late 80s, but it showed me that, you know, that was then, and then now coming into the conversation and seeing what the perspective of our students saying, this is what this looks like now.
Right.
You know, we have to be aware of those signs, and then have to, you know, make sure that we address them and know them so that we don't repeat them.
Right. And to Judah's point earlier, as far as knowing how to love yourself, because some teens may see that the possession or being possessive or checking your phone, where are you at, that's a sign of love for them. And so, well, they care about me, but it could be very more detrimental, because you may create habits, bad habits in dating, of not really recognizing a genuine girl, a genuine boy, you know what I'm saying, in a relationship as you get older, because you're so used to toxicity. And we as society kind of condone toxicity in relationships with social media.
It's becoming the norm.
Right, it's becoming the norm. So I think we have to also be mindful on how to teach students coming into the relationships, even, you know, school-wide events on about teen dating, teen love, loving yourself. So I think it's something we have to really work at in addressing.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And then I think understanding that domestic violence looks more than one way. There's several forms of it, because a lot of them just think, oh, well, they're not hitting me, but we have emotional and mental abuse, we have verbal abuse, we have sexual abuse, we have financial abuse, we have digital abuse in this new age. And so I think understanding that it comes in many different forms. It doesn't look just one way, you know, and so we don't want them to think, oh, just because this person isn't physically hitting me, but these things are in play, I'm doing better, or it's okay, but it's not, you know. And so I think they need to understand that is, you know, a lot to that is more than just one way.
And I think you bring up a great point, because most people, when they think about domestic abuse, they think about men being the aggressor and the abuser.
It's not always the case.
And that's not always the case, you know. And it looks different, like you said. It looks different most of the time, and
And one of the things I do, and I'm glad you said that, because I do have to address that in each session that we do, is that relationship structures are different. Because now it's not only, you know, and a lot of students too, that's another thing, you have to be aware of who your child is, because if they are in, say for instance, a same-sex relationship, a lot of people looking at them like, you know, well, that's not that serious, or you should be able to match strength with that person, which again, we talked about earlier, domestic violence flows from power and control. You know, so anybody can be under those, you know, under those reins in a relationship, regardless of what the relationship structure is. So we don't just want to hold, you know, a relationship saying, oh, a guy can be abusive or a girl is just abusive. Well, what if it's the same gender relationship? So we want to take those just as serious. And a lot of times I've heard students say, well, they don't take it as serious, you know. So sometimes we have to go back to those things that we consider norms or whatever, and kind of dismantle our own process. And I'm speaking from a parental standpoint too when I say our. But we have to go dismantle those things, you know, in our minds too, because a lot of times we do look at it as being one way. Only one particular group of people can be affected by it, when it affects everybody as a whole, you know.
And I think we've made significant progress with, you know, kind of accepting and pivoting because of, you know, what the tolerance and everything of certain topics and certain things that are now now going on. And so I think we've got a long way to go as far as educating people and even ourselves, as far as because there are new things that are coming up each and every day that we have to make sure that we understand, so that we can we all can effectively educate other people and make sure that, you know, these things don't happen, these types of abuse don't happen, and that we can prevent them, and also navigate, because we can't stop everything, but also navigate while we're in them, and how we can get out of it
safely. Sometimes you do
and supporting our students in the process with that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because like when you say support our students, you know, if it's going on in the school, you may need to, move a student from another class to
Right.
the other. Like we have to create safety plans and safe spaces around our students in the school, especially if we know that it's happening.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I think we've had a very powerful conversation regarding teen dating and violence and the signs to look for. So I appreciate each of you being here today. And thank you, listeners, for watching, and get ready to catch our next segment of Let's Talk About It.